You know, or we're gonna set out another row if we need to. The Lord knows we got extra chairs. Anybody want any coffee?
No, thank you.
If someone has a hankering, a little later.
If we need some medication.
Yeah, we got, if you get a little sleepy.
Yeah. we put together an agenda. One of the things that we've been talking about internally is the possibility of getting a professional facilitator to help us through this process. And the county is very open to that, and I won't speak for my fellow commissioners, although I think I probably can in this case, that we're willing to pay for it too. This is a really sensitive conversation, and the last thing we want anybody to feel is that we're trying to pursue some sort of an agenda other than what's best for everyone here in the county. And so that's something that we can kind of talk about at some point pretty soon. The other, and so we basically put together a draft agenda, but we would love more participation and input. And our goal next time is to send this out with plenty of time in advance where people can provide us with things to add and subtract from it. And the first part is identification of key discussion topics. And I was lying in bed last night thinking about this conversation and thinking about this process. And the process that we hope to emulate is the process that we use together as a community to figure out what to do about dispatch, about communications. And that was a somewhat charged topic. There was a lot of different viewpoints. I think we did we tried to do a really good job of being open and transparent and listening to the community. And we went live with JeffCom last month. And so far it seems to be very successful. So at least from our perspective, that's a model for how we would like to move forward. And as I'm lying in bed and thinking about that, this report has a lot of things in it and it's very detailed. There's something I think that's missing in the report that I didn't notice, and I don't know if anybody else noticed, but what we're talking about doing is creating a model for financial sustainability for our fire protection for all the areas in Clear Creek other than where I live, the Evergreen Fire Protection District. And we're talking about tax increases, we're talking about organizational changes. But we actually, I think we all collectively walked past where we should have started, which is, what does the community actually expect? What is it that they believe that they deserve? And I think if you ask different community members in different parts of Clear Creek that are served by the fire authority, when you call 911, what do you expect to have happen? You probably get a different answer from St. Mary's than you do from Floyd Hill, and a different answer from Idaho Springs and Georgetown. But I don't know that we're really going to be able to hone in on what the solution is until we've done a better job of defining what the problem is. And what the problem is what level of protection should we design for our community? And our community is very diverse. Our community is very geographically spread out. I think the fire authority has done a great job of planting excellent fire stations, places like York Gulch and up in St. Mary's. And that helps people with their insurance rates because the insurance services organization measures the type of equipment you have there. And there's a kind of a long formula. I know Kelly's very familiar with it. It's been a focus of his to help people save on their insurance. But just as good of a question or better question is, if you're anywhere in the community and you dial 911, what's going to happen? And is that something that you are okay with? And I don't know that we have done a really good job, and maybe it could be gathered from Mission CIT, but what would happen right now if my house was on fire at various locations and I called 911? How long would it be before there was a crew there in my driveway with the tools that they needed to put water on my house? I don't know, Jeremy, do we have that data right now?
Yeah, I can give you an average from both places, depending on. We can run the reports on it.
Yeah.
By location. But I think it's gonna change. I think if you look at, I think Idaho Springs, for example, was right about the 10-minute range on average, that all responses within the zone. Georgetown was right about 11 minutes. Empire was kind of an odd number. Empire was under Georgetown, but just by location to station 1, about 9 minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's the 3-year average. But that's kind of skewed data because we've changed staffing in that same period. So that includes, a period of all volunteer, to a transition to single staffing to additional staffing. So there's some staffing changes there that also skewed some, shorten those time responses, but. So I haven't run the 23 geographic data yet, but I'm working on that to see what that looks like now, because now that we have, now with the crews in place consistently, now I can run geographic data and see what my average response to that geo polygon.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate you answering. I mean, to put you on the spot like.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
And I think like when somebody shows up, it's clearly important, but if I think about the diversity of different call types, and I'll throw out wildfire, wildland call. I'm not sure what the standards we want to look at, but putting out a wildfire that was lightning caused, that's maybe a few acres, is not going to get done with a handful of people, right? It's going to require probably dozens of people, and anyway, so my thought was, and I don't have a solution for how we gather this, but before our next meeting, I think it would be very helpful for us to create process and execute it to create some kind of a survey and basically make it available to different stakeholders, different homeowners around the community. And one of the things that's, I think, a little bit of a weakness of the kind of fire authority centric way that we're looking at things right now is people in places like Floyd Hill and St. Mary's and even DLD don't really have any direct representation in that model. And they are supposed to, I believe, be represented by George, because George is the representative right now of the entire county and of the BOCC, their Emergency Services District. But I was thinking about the Fire Authority Board. I think it's incumbent upon us to find a way to invite leaders from those communities, even though they're not elected officials, to be here at this table and to be able to represent what their views and what their thoughts are and what their priorities are. But I believe that the goal would be to have maybe a week before our next gathering, results of this survey from different parts of our community and the stakeholders to say, here's what I expect to have happen when I call 911. And I think another key part of that is, here's what I'm willing to pay for it. And maybe I'm jumping the gun on that, but we've, in the Mission CIT report, it has tax rates as high as 18 mils, which is dramatically higher than it is now. It's like 4 times higher than it is right now. So that would mean your fire protection tax, property tax going up by a factor of 4. There's also conversations about the ability to access sales tax dollars. But anyway, I'd love to get some feedback from the stakeholders here in the room. Like, what do you think about the idea of maybe spending a little bit of time backing up and defining the problem better before we start getting too serious about prescribing solutions?
I think that's an excellent idea. And really, I think you're right. It should be asked early on.
Do you have any ideas, Mayor, about how we could go about it, at least here in Idaho Springs?
Well, I think that in our case, the city council does a good job representing their wards. And I think that would be a good place to start, getting some homeowner and business feedback. I think that can be done effectively and I would say in relatively quick order. And you were mentioning different expectations. I think in Idaho Springs, at least the city has put their money where their mouth is. We voluntarily went from 141,000 every year for the fire authority to 275. So we almost doubled. And I just want folks to know, and this is why I say I think there may actually be a stomach for sales tax increase, because when we went from 141,000 to 275, I'm not aware of a single complaint. And to me, that just speaks volumes that our citizens get it. They know that we've been paying about a third or a fourth of what similar communities have been paying. So I'm just saying, in our community, I think the expectation would be that we have, perhaps 4 people, overnight even, here in Idaho Springs. And if it costs us more, in our case, I use the example, we're at 10.55 sales tax. If it went to 10.95, that would be a 0.4 cent increase. I don't think it would be a deal breaker for our visitors, but it would raise an additional $400,000 for fire protection. And there may be other communities that want to follow suit. And you know what? I fully get it if other communities just want to stick with a mill increase. But I think that the sales tax is the least painful way to go.
That's the only way that allows our tourists and visitors to bear some of the costs. And
Thank
they
you.
certainly use some of the services.
Exactly right.
Mr. Smith,
Just input on priority. Well, I'm Robert Smith. I live in Georgetown, 2130 Muscovite. You asked about priorities. Certainly with the fire department, boy, there's probably 6 or 7 that are all number 1. But I certainly one of the ones that concerned me from the last meeting was being close to the national recommendations for safety for our firefighters.
mhm.
We gotta protect those guys.
You're talking about the FBA rural standards that they mentioned.
2 in, 2 out.
Yeah.
I guess I'll jump in. I mean, I think public engagement, if we're talking about identifying the discussion topics, the how of public engagement is definitely one of them. I would love to put out a joint survey. I also am open to doing like open houses, town halls, you know, I mean, we could do one in each municipality and then one in unincorporated area if we wanted. You know, this to me feels urgent and important, and I think we should, you know, hopefully we're all ready to make sure there's a lot of time on our calendars for this. Like I'll attend town halls.
Mhm. Me too.
I think a conversation about what questions we think are important is one that we need to have. You mentioned sort of what kind of responsiveness. You mentioned how do we prioritize the safety of our first responders. There might be other questions that are important too. That's my take on the one topic that we identified, which is public engagement.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of open houses or town halls in addition to a survey, because you're gonna reach different groups of people that way.
Right.
And maybe even for unincorporated Clear Creek County, maybe a couple, you know, St. Mary's is kind of a entity unto themselves, DLD, you know, Floyd Hill. Yeah, those are the 3 that came to mind.
Yeah, I think there are more than those, but yeah, to carve out the individual neighborhoods density, and because you're each gonna have a little different response time and situation. I also agree that I mean, many of us have expressed a lot of opinions about what we think, but until we listen to what everybody really wants to help us define the need, the public wants, it's better to listen than to express those. You know, an example is the different kinds of funding models. Is it a sales tax or is it a property tax? And when you look at the amount of money that was indicated in the CIT report, if we were to go for the you know, a national standard, it's hard to make either one of those pencil out as enough. And so then you have to decide and what do we want? Do we want as much as that standard is? And if we do, it's going to cost this much. And it may be that it takes more than one method of fundraising to get the job done. And there are a lot of other things that we're raising money for at the same time. Other problems we're trying to solve too.
Anything else?
Let me make a suggestion. So we've already got a CWPP study out there that breaks the county into operational zones, which is basically polygons of neighborhoods, population. If George is willing, we can get with Megan, we could probably develop another survey using the same software we're currently using that lists these questions. Some of those are already in CWPP. But how would you like to see it funded? Whatever those questions look like, and put it out, kick it out via QR code and consolidate the data, because that program consolidates data for us, which is totally awesome. And we just use the same geo boxes that we're currently using for the CWPP, because it makes it clean, and most people that have done the survey have already seen that. So they recognize that, hey, I live in the Floyd Hill operational area. Okay, I understand this. So maybe that's a way to do it, and that gives us data that links back to business or private. Are you a business owner in the community, or do you live in the community, and where do you live? All that detail is built in, so all we have to do is consolidate, take that, bring it over, then add the questions you guys collectively want to ask. And I think it's very doable when we send out the QR code for all of the social media links like we did the last one, and up to including just face-to-face conversations with people. I think we can generate a lot of data in a fairly short period of time that will hit people that aren't willing or not willing or don't have time to come to a public open house, but do have 10 minutes to do that survey real quick to get their voices. So I think we can consolidate the public responses with the survey responses and get a reasonable idea of what the expectations of service are and how people think it should be funded. Moving forward.
No, I agree with that. I think that's a good idea. I think, is it possible, what's today's Monday, is it possible to drive a process to get a draft of the survey question sometime this week? I mean, I think we probably focus on maybe getting county staff to draft the initial set, maybe send it to the different stakeholders and have you a chance to weigh in on it, and you can get it sent out sort of by the end of the week. That would give us plenty of time to have a look at the data and, you know, consolidate it and have it available at least a couple, no more than a few weeks from now. Brian?
So Megan and I discussed this afternoon. Part of our concern is that we've got an actual player survey out there right now.
We do.
And now throwing another one out there, it's gonna be confusing.
What's the survey that's out there right now?
It's the CWPP that
Oh,
Jeremy
yeah,
mentioned.
yeah.
So I would think maybe what we might want to do is maybe do a little bit of a PR push about the survey coming out and to create a little lag between the survey that's going on right now.
That'd be perfect.
When does that survey close?
It doesn't, it's perpetual. We kind of, that's only the size that we leave out there.
We did one hard push to get people to take that survey, and as of this afternoon, 65 folks had gone online and did take it. So it's not a big number.
I mean, one of the things that gives me a pit in my stomach is the idea that we might want to create a ballot question and the deadlines associated with that and how much work we have and how long it's going to take us to kind of move through that process in a transparent manner. And the idea of burning up weeks because I'm concerned about another survey. I'm not sure personally. I'm more worried about that, or I'm more worried about watching time disappear.
I'm worried about you getting the data you need out of the survey.
Yeah.
Can a current survey be paused and reopened after this one that has more time sensitive urgency?
Well, they're
Be
both,
pushed
they're
out?
both time sensitive, that's a problem. We got a CWPP deadline coming in July, that's why
Okay.
it's such a hard push. We have a non-movable date for CWP implementation of July, that's why I need the data from that at the time I did.
We've got a Zoom hand up.
Okay.
Hi, that was me. Sorry, it's Megan. Sorry I couldn't be there. I was just gonna say we can pause it online if you guys are wanting us to. And I'm happy to do another survey, but like Brian said, I don't want to confuse the public. Obviously it would be a different survey, and I would love to have the help of the other municipalities to kind of get that out there. But yeah, we would just have to, I think, explain up front what the difference is between these surveys and hopefully maybe keep it a little bit shorter. The CWPP one is really long because it needs to be, but this one, I think we keep it really short and we'll get more responses.
And a suggestion to add on to that is, if we're talking about a survey to inform a ballot measure, we could decide to have a survey done professionally, right? With questions that are well designed and that takes efforts to make sure we get a good response rate. I mean, that's what we did when we did Road and Bridge. I think that's common practice, if not
Yeah.
standard practice.
And maybe going through a process like that is gonna buy a little bit of lag time, just by virtue of the fact that that's not gonna get done by the end of this week. But probably it's gonna take a month.
Yeah, we have two different, it's actually. I'm almost talking faster than thinking right now, because something else occurred to me, but there are two basic areas when you are trying to get a ballot, like when you're trying to come up with a deadline to get on the ballot. The first one is, of course, there's all the legal, deadlines to get paperwork filed and stuff like that. But more importantly than that, I mean, obviously you have to get that done, but more importantly than that is that you have socialized the whole idea well enough to have a chance at the ballot. And so that clock is, ticking right now. And although this survey and how you socialize and make sure that everyone knows about the survey can be part of how you build that trust and goodwill towards a ballot measure too. I mean, the fact that you're out there doing it shows you're trying to be responsible and know what people want and give them what they want. And if the ballot question, and if you do manage to get one on there, at least it can be based on that. It can be based on, this is the feedback they gave us informally. Now we're going to find out formally what they want, whether they're willing.
Well, and you may get better response if people have that kind of built-in knowledge of the urgency. The ballot question needs to be decided, so the information needs to come in, and they may not put it off if they know, I mean, and you're letting them know what options might be on that ballot question, so.
How many questions is the CWPP survey?
A lot.
Yeah.
It's like dozens.
Yeah, it's like 4 pages, because it covers all the key initiatives within the CWPP have to be covered in the survey, so it's huge.
And
Those are-
35 to 40.
Yeah, I think it's like 35 questions to.
And those are for residents of the Fire Protection Authority.
Yep.
Footprint. Cause I'm thinking more of like 10 questions for the thing I'm talking about, that's simple and easy, and someone can fill it out in 5 minutes or less.
It'd be great.
Right.
The balancing act survey that we purchased during the budget process was bought by a polling company, and so we're reaching out to them just to inquire what they might be able to do for us.
Yeah, I mean, we can spend $10,000 on a statistically significant survey pretty easily. I mean, the county meets, the Board of County Commissioners meets tomorrow. And I'm looking at Peter, I think we could direct staff to start talking to somebody to get a survey done together. What would help inform a decision like that would be feedback from you all, and or Randy and Sean saying, George, get yourself off of that island because you're alone.
You're not alone. Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is, I think, at the highest level of importance to me personally in terms of what gets accomplished by the end of the year before my time in politics or public service is over. And you can always, I can tell if something's important to someone. It's on their calendar, they spend time on it, and it's in their checkbook, they spend money on it, and I'm happy to do both.
So.
I think it's a given. I was kind of surprised that you felt you were on an island. But anyway.
Check it in. But how does that with the I said just check it in. How would the municipalities feel about that without the county engaging somebody to get a professional survey done?
With your input.
Yes.
I think it's a good idea.
Road and Bridge effort was successful, so I think probably a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with some. The data we can get is awesome.
I knew there was a fourth municipality somewhere.
George's counting head, give him a. The exorcist spinning your head around.
Okay, I think that's a great, personally, I think we've accomplished a lot in terms of public engagement. I wonder what other key discussion topics there
Yeah, let me open it up to the floor. What's something that someone came here this evening, hoping to bring up or talk about before we left?
If I could, I'm gonna mess this acronym up, but it is the rating agency. And we were a 4, we just missed being,
Oh,
ISO.
oh, thank you,
Insurance
thank you very
Services
much.
Organization.
And we just missed being a 3 by like 3 points. So one thing I was curious, and I think it really could have an impact on the way that people answer questions, for example. I'm making a number up, but if you were going to vote yes or no on, say, a $200 increase on your mills for an average property owner, and you were to find out that in beefing up our fire protection, we could easily be in the 3, and it would save you, say, 10% on your insurance. Now that might significantly increase your willingness to go along. If you see, okay, well, I got an extra 200 going out, but I'm saving darn near that, right, on my insurance bill. So, and I don't know, I have no idea what the answer there is, if it is inconsequential or if it's really something to, they could weigh. Sean, I think you might know somebody that has some experience in that area.
I do, and I mean, I know Evergreen's version of that because I was the president of the fire department when we were going through our ISO, and I live near King Murphy, and so I'm in the Station 5 area, and I think we're a 5, and I think that's the best we're ever going to be because we're not in a hydrant district, but we're that far away from a responding station. So my guess is the 3 or 4 is Idaho Springs, but I think Floyd Hill and St. Mary's and DLD, I think everyone has different numbers based on their stations and where their distance from them. 'Cause I think you're a 9 if you're more than 5 miles from a station, something like that. Is that right, Jeremy?
Correct. So just to tag on to this, we are working, formally requesting an ISO evaluation for this summer, not for the Scribble Ballot Initiative, but yeah, we missed it by 3.7 points roughly. All those points were within municipal water systems. The biggest ones we missed it by were municipal water systems. All the municipalities have since fixed records and stuff for those areas that were deficient. So we've got hydrant record, hydrant flush records, maintenance records, all stuff we didn't have at the time in 2021 we have now. And that's what kept us out of the 3. We've also added some training credits, fire investigators credits and stuff, but that's smaller. It's a weighted percentage, it's not as impactful overall. So we already anticipate having enough points to be in the middle 3 range. Hopefully by fall of 2024.
But that wouldn't be, from what I just heard you say, that wouldn't be countywide.
No, it'd be anywhere within 1,000 feet of a hydrant and 5 miles of a fire station, or 1,000 feet of a acceptable cistern. So like there's homes in York Gulch that they get the rating. There's homes on Saddleback that get the rating. Right, so that's what's key. And this is just because I started pushing on this in 2020. I got the evaluation in 21. We started, if you go all the way back, we started at 7 to 6, and we were 5 for umpteen years. I thought we can get to a 4 and that would be a win. We almost got to a 3, and I went, okay, well, we misjudged that by a little bit, but we've been working to get to a 3, because that's the end goal. I don't think we'll ever get below a 3 up here, but I need to be a solid middle of the 3 range for the eternity of my career. So we're going to request an evaluation, and we anticipate it probably take till fall, about a 5 to 6 month lead time to get on the schedule. We live in Grand Junction, but that's already in process, and that's because the municipal partners they've got records now that they couldn't produce in 21. So on top of the incremental stuff that we've got in the department, our staffing has increased since then. So the average staffing on calls, all that has gone up a little bit, but that's not as important as the points that we're really looking for is from water system points.
Yeah, and I remember when we did it in Evergreen, like we literally bought master streams for all the engines. Which is kind of stupid because you're in a situation where water is super dear, so what are you gonna do, 1,000 GPM Master Street?
Exactly.
But it buys you points, you put it on your
We've got
truck,
all
you
our
get points for the
engines
ISO
that
test.
right, so that's how we originally went from a 5 to that. That helped us go from a 6 to a 5 in 2013. So yeah, that's little investments
You
we're
gotta play
talking
the
about.
games.
And now we're kind of splitting hairs at this level. When you're a 7, you want to go to a 6, it doesn't take a lot of effort. Little changes equal big points. Well, now we're in that, once you go below a 5, it takes a lot to get to that next level. So I spend a ton of time on ISO and looking at points and opportunities and records and what we have to do and working. I got out with Empire and went through their hydrant system to have records. It was time well spent. How do you flush a hydrant? This is how you do it. Here's the tools to do it. Record it. We need to do that. So I think that's where we're going with ISO. But from a ballot initiative perspective, it goes down to how do you maintain it? And it does make a difference whether between getting insurance and not getting insurance. Especially in an unincorporated part of the county, it's a big factor, as we know, and it's getting worse.
Yeah.
So, Chuck, were you suggesting that jurisdictions sort of establish an ISO goal? That might be a little more complicated for the unincorporated portion, but I'm curious, what were you hoping to get from this conversation?
Well, if we're talking a mill increase or a sales tax, either way, I just think it helps. The question, if they knew, if there's something gonna bring down the insurance, and hopefully it's more than just some kind of inconsequential amount, but, maybe a 5 or 10% reduction on folks' homeowners insurance, which has been going up dramatically. If there was some relief provided, I just frankly think it's a better sell if there's an additional carrot on there. And I honestly, I don't know if going from a 4 to a 3 is, anything, that's that dramatic, but I'd like to know.
Well, just to add to that, I think the carrot actually is more of the ISO is when you guys develop a funding structure, make sure the funding structure has capacity to add additional cisterns within the district that are funded by the authority, not funded by the property owners that really can't afford it. We've been having this conversation for 2 years with property owners. I tell them what it costs per gallon. And it's not easily a good conversation after that.
What does like a 10,000 gallon
It's
system?
about $40,000, about $4 a gallon. So if you build that into the structure, then part of the goal of this is to add cisterns throughout the community, the unincorporated part of the county. That is a direct benefit to their insurance and their ability to become insured. And that's one of our biggest issues that I've been working through the last 3 years is with property owners and HOAs on how do we add and where do we add them? And then really, how do you fund them? And Sean probably went through all that in Evergreen. I remember some of those conversations there. It's a big project, but it does return great benefits to the community.
Yeah, I mean, now when there's new neighborhoods and everything, which happens very infrequently, they basically have to cough up for
Yeah.
30-40,000
Floyd Hill's that way,
gallons.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, there's a 25,000 and 45,000 gallon cistern on Floyd Hill was paid for by the developer of the tax title
Yeah,
development.
exactly.
That was my experience. The last place I built over there was exactly that. You can sprinkle a house and you can do a whole lot of other things, or you can give us a 30,000 gallon cistern. And I have a question when you mentioned 10,000 gallon cisterns, Jeremy. So for you or Andy or if he's in here or whomever else, how much value in a structure fire, how much value is a 10,000 gallon cistern?
Actually huge.
Okay.
With the change in tactics, if I run average water use for most of our structures, even in the last 3 years, we're probably 3,500 to 3,600 gallons or less. Total use on the structure. Going to Gulf was under 3,000. So
Okay.
it makes a marked difference if they're strategically placed, and that's enough to make the ISO credit effective for community homes within 1,000 feet of that. That is a game changer for their insurance.
And most attack pumpers in Evergreen have 500 gallons on them. And if you get there soon enough, you can put a room contents fire out easily with 500 gallons or less. But as soon as it vents, then it's a different situation and you're having to set up a water shuttle and kind of dig into the long haul.
So when you're talking about water,
it's a conglomerate of the distribution system, for example, the cistern or the city water, and the ability of the hydrants and the flow that you're getting out of them, it's all combined, or?
It is, it's all combined, so it starts with what's your flow capacity for your hydrants, how many gallons per minute do your hydrants flow? So like the downtown district is 2,000 gallons a minute is minimum flow requirements. So will your hydrants support that? Those calculations, but that's where we're having the flow testing on the hydrants allows us to do those calculations to get the credit. Are the hydrants maintained every year? We have records that it's every year is better. You can maintain a hydrant every 3 to 5 years and still get credit, but every year is maximizing your credit. Is there a record of maintaining your water system? We check the hydrants every 2 years. We flow test them every year. These are the results. This is our issue log. So that's all been in place. And then that's the key factor for it. And then we'll go out with the ISO inspection and we'll spot check 2 or 3 hydrants of their choice. And normally the flow test exceeds what the records show, the average is, which is great. As long as they meet it, then that completes the flow check portion of it. And that's really what we're looking for. It's just, and it gets bad when they say, you have maintenance records on your hydrants, and the municipal water user goes, maintenance records for what? It goes south pretty quickly from there.
Yeah.
But I think all the municipal partners have done an amazing job of getting those records where they need to be. So we're in a position now where we take the ISO inspector out. He has records to look for, he has flow tests to look at. It makes that process very simple. At least from my perspective, going through it even in 21. That was the one thing that we ran into a roadblock with. We had them in certain places, Empire had records, Dorset has partial records, and we unfortunately got down here and we didn't have the records to show them at the time, and that's all been fixed now. So that makes a big difference, and water supply is it's a large portion of that weighted average of the total 160 points. So
How big a role does upgrading your building code play in the ISO rating?
building code helps, but it's not as key.
Heavily.
Do you have an adopted building code? It's kind of that checkbox as part of it.
Okay,
It goes into how many inspections do we do in the year? How do we inspect? The self-inspection program was structured this spring actually helps with ISO points, which is why we've been working on that for a year and a half now. Do we investigate as required? We didn't in 21. We didn't have certified investigators in 21. We do now. So all of these things shift. You can generate more ISO points. So I think everybody's chasing the #1 ISO class of 1, which we'll never get in the rural community. Doesn't mean we can't pursue it. At least to the best of our ability, trying to max out as many categories as we can.
I'm curious if it would be helpful for us to dedicate a session so that fire authority staff can bring us the ISO rating system with recommendations for how to score better. Maybe that would be, because we're just generating a bunch of good content here, and I'm afraid it's gonna be lost.
We can sit down with the ISO report and look at the weighted average. I can put the weighted average up on the screen and talk through that.
And then, George, I would just recommend we complement that with how much of a improvement would that make with like homeowner policies, for example. Because I think we'll get down to brass tacks on is this worth pursuing a great deal, or is it so inconsequential as to not impress everybody? And really, as I see here today, I don't have a clue. But I think our voters, when they look at a pro-con, it could be quite an issue if it's going to be a savings, like especially if it were a 5 or 10% off insurance policies, which have been going up dramatically.
won't that vary so much with, depending on the insurance company? I mean, wouldn't it be better to just keep it very, very general if you're gonna throw it into a survey? And then would you be in favor of X if an ISO rating of 3 or 4 or somewhere in that range would offset that increase in your expenses, then they've got to go running to their insurance company to ask this, I just don't feel like I would feel comfortable promising that an insurance company would definitely offer a reduction.
Yeah, I guess I was hoping for more of a national average. You know, like if
Okay.
you have a team that takes a defensive driving course, you know, maybe not every insurance will give you a discount, but most on a national average, say knock it down, you know, 10 or 15%. So parents are pushing the kids into the defensive driving
True.
class, right? You know, to say, so
True.
I'm just hoping to get somewhere so folks can see dollars and cents on an average national
Yeah.
average.
Yeah, I can see that, and it's easier to. It's easier to present to people, here's what you should be looking at, but I feel real uncomfortable. If there is any such thing as a national average, I don't know. The insurance companies seem to be authorities unto themselves, and
There should be an industry standard though, from the insurance companies that
You would
we
think.
could find, because then all of a sudden you're going down a rabbit hole if we're trying to explain to the average resident or the average homeowner, business person, the whole ISO thing. We're getting in way too deep. That's
Okay.
not, you know, if there's so I agree with you. If, you know, there's a possibility that we can pinpoint, you know, and Jeremy, you may even know, you know, if we come down from 4 to 3 or 5 to 3, or, you know, whatever that range is.
I'll do a little research. I'm not sure, because I know it does make a difference sometimes between like businesses, you know, that afford insurance. Within like
Yeah.
downtown, Detroit downtown district especially, that's where the ISO has probably the greatest insurance impact is
I think-
within
Yeah.
insuring commercial districts, commercial properties, but I'm not sure what the.
Well, I went from a 9 to a 5, it was a noticeable drop.
Oh, it should have been remarkable, is a nice way to say it, right? So,
Yeah,
and that's where cisterns, available water sources and stuff in your district. Around those outlying stations become a key success factor.
yeah. And when I think about the report, I think one of the things that wasn't covered very well was the budgeting for capital, right? Wasn't it like $500,000 a year or something, starts up in a few years, and there's really no explanation of what that should look like or could look like. And back to the ballot initiative, what a lot of communities end up doing is they put some energy into that and figuring out how can we improve our system and make some capital improvements. And again, back to Evergreen, that's when they did the outlying stations, Station 5 in Brooklyn, or 8 in Brook Forest, 7 in Floyd Hill, Station 5 in my neighborhood in Upper Bear. And they also did the maintenance facility where our EMS gets maintained. That was all a bond initiative to basically fund all of that. So part of the idea about building cisterns and upgrading your ISO could be, you know, part of a capital plan that we lack right now. And I do think that that's something that we're gonna have to at least address at some level before anything could show up on a ballot that would make sense in November.
I think the variability of different people's homes, you know, we're not gonna be able to tell everybody they're gonna move this many points because every person isn't gonna have that result. So I'm trying to think of how to socialize that towards a ballot question, and it's a hard one to do because you don't like to make, contrary to popular belief, most of us don't like to make promises for elections that we don't intend to keep and can't, you know? That's a joke,
Everybody
aren't
was looking at me when I said that.
you? No, I was just, anybody that has sat around and thought about how to sell themselves in an election has had to cross that bridge. And so all I'm saying is, with regard to this one, it's gonna be really variable depending on where you live in the county, whether you derive an actual benefit in your insurance. It will probably in some places and not in others.
So
And we're asking everybody to vote, so.
Yeah.
I'm kind of keeping a running list of the things we're surfacing in this conversation, and I hear what's the impact of a better ISO score and how can we improve our ISO score as the additional information we needed related to this. I'm thinking I have some other things on this list that I have either heard or popped into my brain that I want to share with you all. I know that there's a lot of interest in clarifying the legal boundaries surrounding governance and revenue options. I know that basically the attorneys for Clear Creek County and for the fire authority have been asked to get together and put that together. So we know that, right? And I think we all kind of know the questions there. How can sales tax be in the mix? And what are the rules around that? I think we need to hear, as a member of the Board of County Commissioners, I'm waiting to hear from my staff about what it would look like to operationalize the recommendation that the county run the fire department. There's a host of questions there. So I think that's like on the list of additional information needed. That's there. What else should be on that list?
As I was tossing and turning, I also thought about this concept that's come up a few times, trust. And I've heard very clearly from stakeholders that there's trust issues, and I would like to personally understand those better. No one's perfect. I don't think the county's perfect at any stretch, but I do think that the process around JeffCom was transparent, and I think it was well run, and I think that's a good representation of how the county operates in 2024. And I don't know what the county operated like in the 90s or the 2000s, so I'm not sure how we crack that nut, or maybe this is, you know, fertile ground for a professional facilitator who has experience with this. But I do think that this is something that I would love for us to at some point talk about a little bit more. What are the things that cause loss of trust? What can we do to increase trust? Because I do think that that's going to be, it's a stumbling block right now.
And I think specifically, what are the outcomes we hear, right? To say you don't trust a person is to say you're worried that something is going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what that thing is that we're worried will happen.
Sean, I'm glad to hear you bring that up, because I think JeffCom is an excellent example. And frankly, I don't mind telling folks here in the room, the city of Idaho Springs was particularly concerned with the county. We had even thought, if, I'm not saying they would take us, but maybe we would just even go on our own with JeffCom. But what happened was, it actually ended up being a very good partnership with the county. I think I do agree with you. The county was very forthright, very open. It turned out to be quite the win-win for everybody involved. I think, you know, the citizens ended up with something much better, because there was a lot of fear mongering, like we're putting our budget concerns over the safety of our citizens was a common cry. And it turns out there was absolutely no sacrificing there because of economies of scale. I would suggest that there were certainly savings, but I'm glad that that's the example you gave, because it turned out to be tremendous.
Yeah, thank you. And I've even heard indirectly from some of the folks who are working at JeffCom, and it turns out it seems like it's a pretty good place to work.
Yep, I've heard the same thing.
Well, that is the argument that you have to face each time, because anytime you're trying to increase efficiencies to become better, there's a savings relative to the service that you're delivering. So you can always be characterized as putting money over. But I think in this case, what we're really driven by is the service level, and trying to make sure that it can be as good as it can be, not only for insurance rates, but for response times and the number of people that are there when they do respond. Make sure that, because having a response time alone is only part of it. If it's only 2 people that have responded, then you still got a problem.
I'm kind of new to these meetings, so forgive me if we've kind of gone over this already. I'm Kasia, Assistant Town Administrator from Georgetown. What would the benefits of the county managing this as opposed to the fire authority be? Like, what are the pros and cons there?
So the report has 3 different possible scenarios. One of them is stay the way that you are now, a fire authority. And I'll tell you what my thoughts are on that, and anyone in the room can correct me or add or subtract. The fire authority was a good solution to bringing together separate fire departments, because it used to be Idaho Springs had its own fire department, Empire had its own, Georgetown had its own. Where those towns would have direct representation in oversight, and would basically be able to appoint certain members to the fire authority board, right? Idaho Springs gets two, the county gets two, Georgetown gets two, Silverton gets one, Empire gets one. In my mind, it has its strengths in that there's direct representation. But those people aren't elected. And in my short time in Evergreen, there's been 2 board recalls, when the board basically got sideways with, one time the volunteer firefighters, another time some neighbors. One of the recalls worked, one of them didn't. And I think there's advantages to have an oversight board that are elected people, and that's Title 32. That's a special district such as Evergreen has in many other places. The thing that I don't like about the fire authority representation is in very important communities, like rural, like the unincorporated areas such as St. Mary's, they don't really have any direct say, and they don't have a seat at the table. And there's some arguments that, well, those are the first 2. And so Title 32 is pretty similar to the fire authority, only people actually have to run for office, and you get paid like $100 a meeting or something like that. So it's not a job that you could, retire to or something. But there's 5 directors in Evergreen, and I mean, it's a competitive election. People campaign, yard signs, all of that kind of thing. So I think the argument for having something like that is you have people who really want to do it, right? And who are taking some risks and spending some energy to get those positions. And when you have appointed positions, like we're very familiar with those at the county level, because Open Space Commission, Planning Commission, that all of those are appointed, and sometimes it's hard to find people to do them. The third choice is the county, and in some ways it has the advantage of being run by electeds, but they're different electeds. It would be, the Emergency Services District right now is also the Board of County Commissioners. I think personally 2 unique things that having it run under the county's flag. One of them is you have easy access to other revenue sources such as sales tax. In my time here, and I'm a pretty financially conservative guy, but I got behind 2 different tax initiative increases that were on the ballot with my enthusiasm and support. One was a 0.65% sales tax dedicated to funding EMS. The other one was a 1% sales tax, 3/4 of the county got, 1/4 of the cities got for road and bridge. And having it under the county's leadership would make it very easy for another sales tax, if that's what the solution was. I'm not saying that is the solution. I know there's some discussion about maybe there's other ways that you can have a non-county entity going after sales tax, and I'm not gonna weigh in on that. One of the other things I think that is the benefit of the county running it is it allows you to achieve very important economies of scale with EMS. And if you look at other agencies around the state of Colorado, it's hard to find a rural agency that has a completely separate fire department with the EMS, because each of them has all of their own real estate issues and facilities issues and administrative overhead and payroll and all the rest of that kind of thing. And also, most of the agencies that are integrated have a much closer working relationship. And part of it's just because they have the same chain of command. And again, going back to Evergreen, that's what I know. That's where I spent 22 years. One thing that they do that is so simple that has such impact is they split crews. And so what that means is if the things get hot and calls are dropping, maybe it's a storm or something's going on, a volunteer will go to the call, will hand the keys of their car to one of the paramedics, who will get in their car, drive back to the station where there's another ambulance. And instead of taking 2 paramedics out of district for at least 2 hours, one guy goes down, volunteer drives, the paramedic goes back to the station, and the next call that drops, you have another ambulance that can go take that. And it doesn't happen very much anymore, but in the 90s, when I started with Evergreen, I would drive. I would basically be in the back and attending as a volunteer EMT. And Dr. Pons, who ran Denver General at the time, he had this saying that was funny. He said, the only fluid your patient needs is diesel, which is quit messing around and wasting time on scene with your getting a line in the guy. Just get him in the back, get him down here where we can actually do something to help them. So anyway, those are a couple of examples of how different agencies, when they work under one flag, can work much more effectively. But essentially, Evergreen has the ability with the same staff to run twice as many ALS calls down the hill as we do. But I'm biased. So what are some other answers to that question about what are the kind of differences and why would the county make sense, or why would the fire authority make sense, or why would a Title 32 make sense?
Well, from a municipality standpoint, I like the fact that we have direct representation. The fact that those representatives are appointed by the electeds from that municipality is what I think gives them authority to take the action. I don't necessarily think that those that serve on the board have to be the electeds. If they're not doing their job, the municipality should hear about it. We should appoint somebody new. So the part of the trust issue is going from having two voices on a board to being on an advisory board, which you're expressing your wishes and opinions, but they don't necessarily have direct effect on, it's not a vote.
I think that's fair.
Another thing to think about is that it's hard to find people to serve on boards, as you said, even when there's an easy button to get them there, which is appoint them. And, you know, there's a kind of critical mass of people that are willing to do things like that in the community. And so if we're setting up a board like that to be elected, and you have a hard time finding enough people to even volunteer for it, it might, you know, campaigns aren't that much fun. They take time, you know, and they put you out there. So maybe, yeah, there's a pro and a con to it. I'm seeing it. We may have a harder time filling the board if somebody's got to put a bunch of work into it and even a little bit of money to try to get there, you know, to not be paid.
I think you've increased the accountability of the fire authority in great leaps by making them accountable to 5 different agencies as opposed to one to one. So they got to let Georgetown, convince Georgetown we're on the right page, just as they had to convince you that we're all doing this together, kind of thing, as opposed to just, you know, 2 or 3 elected officials or to just the county. You know, one of the things when the fire authority, when Jeremy and Kelly were able to come to the Georgetown board meeting a week or so ago, we had a special work session, and we were looking at, you know, the points that the study provided to us. The question that they were asking us is, please go through these recommendations and tell us, you rank them for us. And our response to them was, you're the professionals, you rank these recommendations and you tell us if it's already in place, because obviously there's been some time since the study was completed and they have made some of those improvements, or they were already in the works. And so those aren't reflected in the study. And so I want our career professionals to tell me where we rank and what they need in order to get to the next level. And is that next level appropriate for a rural fire department and not a DC consultant? Because it's apples and oranges in some areas. And the explanations that they were able to provide to us sounded very valid to us. But again, I want them to make those recommendations to us. And then we might tweak them a little bit and say, Georgetown's priority really is this. And maybe Idaho Springs doesn't have that same priority, and we're gonna have to make some kind of a compromise as to where the fire authority is going with that. But I wanna hear from them as, to us as a group now, and what's their comeback to this study. And then let's sit down at this table and see where we go from there. Before we change, but let's make sure we're changing in the right direction, if we need to change. Or what we need to improve.
Would like to state that I feel everything you have just said is why I want to be certain we have representation. And that is not something that we're being guaranteed. And that's one of my worries.
So just one other question though, and Sean, I think you brought this up. If St. Mary's isn't represented on our fire authority board, why not? Why can't we change that board to allow for that one representation, just like the Silver Plume's got one in the game type thing? If we've got an area, you know, in the Evergreen, Floyd Hill, Saddleback area, you know, why don't we have that, you know? Let's get those little onesies in there, so that everyone has a voice then.
Sometimes I just think about the populations represented in that.
Right.
I mean, that's a reasonable thing. I mean, we've got 2 people from Idaho Springs representing 1,800 people, 2 people from Georgetown representing, you're up to about 1,200 now, right? 1 person from Silver Plume representing 150 people, 1 person from Empire, 300 people.
Open on ours. It says state in the IPA, I got 2 people off ours, so I mean, really, we could.
You have 2 seats. So, what I'm getting at, and I don't think population is the only measure, because you also need to look at like the values you're trying to protect. But this is a good point, because both St. Mary's and Dumont have higher populations than Empire and Silver Plume combined.
And Georgia,
Individually.
I think I know the answer, but I want to make sure I don't want to put words in your mouth. How do we do on like quorums for meetings? Are we getting people passionate enough to show up?
We go many months without being able to do meetings.
I thought you had mentioned, I want to make sure I remember that correctly.
There's been some absentee on there, but I don't think there's been many months. And
I
one
don't
of
either.
I mean, one of our biggest absentees in the other seat on the ESP board too.
That doesn't cost your forum.
But I mean, I want to go back and see where we missed forums in the past year. I really do.
I think I remember, I might be wrong, but I think it was like April, May, June, or May, June, July.
And I think a lot of those meetings were skipped. There were the lack of people showing up. They were either rescheduled or they were skipped.
Mary said something that piqued my interest. I was trying to remember what it was.
I'll press rewind.
Oh, you said you wanted to hear from the fire authority, and I agree. And so the fire authority board, and you guys correct me if I'm misunderstanding, has said we want fire authority staff to prioritize digesting the operational recommendations. As a member of the fire authority board, I want that staff to bring it to the fire authority board for us to arrive at our opinions and then communicate them out to the jurisdiction about our opinions on these operational plans. And what, in my mind, what that means are recommendations. That means, what do we agree with and how do we prioritize it? And to Sean's earlier point, what capital needs are not identified, right? What's not accurate in that report? I've heard the statement made that it's not that there are inaccuracies, and that needs to be put in writing. So I think that's the thing to add to the list for sure.
Yeah, to resolve the discrepancies so that we have something to come to agreement on with confidence.
And also just, comment on, like, what does the fire authority think? Do they think we need a dedicated marshal, or do we think we can improve our ability to conduct fire inspections with that stuff? What else? I know, like, I heard that Empire stated that there were a lot of questions that were on your board when you had a meeting, and that you all needed a lot more information. So I'm curious.
They came back and answered our questions. We've had 2 meetings with.
So I know that Brian received an email saying there are a bunch of extra questions, and those questions have been answered.
Yes.
Do you mind sharing those questions and answers?
George, I'm running on fumes. I've been in St. Anthony's Hospital for the last 3.5 days. I'm lucky to remember my own name. I can't do that right now. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I will,
could Jeanette?
no. Doubtful. I'll pull up the minutes and try to send you what I can. I just can't shoot from the hip and tell you what was said.
I think what you mean is,
Right.
right now, you can't give that answer,
Correct.
correct? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not.
Can I jump back though, because if we get these recommendations, you know, or point and counterpoint from this study and our fire departments, fire authorities. Input, that's gonna be beneficial when the survey goes out to the public. Because then we've got these priorities, otherwise we're asking these vague questions that need way too much explanation, which is why it takes people too much time to respond to the survey, and perhaps they don't. Because you want a 5-minute survey, bing, 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 bing.
One page.
You know, so if we've got, or what are you willing to pay? Are you willing to increase your mills or your sales tax or whatever? What of this do you want? You know, and are you willing to pay for it? Yes or no? I mean, I know I'm oversimplifying it, but I think if we have some of those recommendations and we've got them fine-tuned and there's some agreement on them, you know, and timeframes, that's what we can put out to the rest of the community here and have them respond to that, and that will help us focus for the next step for ballots or whatever.
I think you're right. We gotta figure out how to go out to the public with less than 18 mil asked.
I'll just throw out one additional comment, and then from time to time, I have a little sarcastic voice over here in this here, but when you said maybe 10, 12 questions, well worded, focused on the data we need, and I really like that 5-minute response, gonna get a high response rate. And then you said, let's have a professional survey prepared. And that voice went, oh, great, it's gonna wind up 65 questions, 300-word essay, and take an hour and a half to get done.
You can tell them 10. I mean, they're our client.
I'm just saying, don't let it turn into a monster that the other one was.
Yeah, I mean, there's another thing that I want to bring up. I want to be respectful. The fire authority, I think historically, has lacked providing the right oversight and the right accountability for their staff. And my examples are, when's the last time the chief had a performance review, a written performance review? It's never happened to my knowledge. And that's basically a very elemental duty of a board of directors. The other one is, why is it that they have no strategic plan? Why is it there's no capital plan? I mean, these are that
We have a strategic plan.
I've seen that, and I don't, if you look at other strategic plans for neighboring departments, I think it's pretty lacking. I think it's
It's a
missing.
work in progress. It's a live working document in my mind. And it's
Yeah.
a lot further than we have been since I've been on that board. I mean, really, so that's why, and then we have done performance reviews. They haven't been done, I think, maybe 2 years. But there's been many performance reviews since I've been on that board. Okay. I've done 10 of them, I would say. I've been on that board. This will be 12 years in April.
Yeah, written ones that are.
Yes, they are
Part of the
documented.
part of the public record.
He has them, yes, they are.
Doing one in 2019 and one in 2020.
There is performance reviews in there. We do have a strategic plan.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the plan that was done by
Lackluster doesn't mean
Coleman.
we don't have one though.
I mean, there was a 40-page document that I looked at that didn't have any of the elements of what I would consider to be a strategic plan based on my limited knowledge. I mean, and I know I'm gonna try to say everything one last time, but they just paid Matrix Group $45,000 to do a strategic plan. It's like 270 pages. And it's a damn good document, and it's on their website.
That's great. We're doing what we can with what we've got. They're a lot bigger than we are, is all I'm saying. You saying that we don't have a strategic plan is a lie. I mean, we do have a strategic plan, is all I'm saying. Just because it's lackluster up to your accountability for Evergreen at that point, I don't think it's lackluster. I think it's a live working document that's actually a very beneficial document.
And that can be part of what's included, you know, I hear you on that, and maybe it needs to be updated a little bit, but let our fire authority.
Let appreciate you.
include that as we're putting this information together for the public and for us, because we're the ones who are gonna be writing the checks for more money at some point. So, you know, a lot of times comprehensive plans, strategic plans, they're great documents, they're all pretty, and then they sit on a shelf.
I think that's the more interesting question is,
Are
Let's
we
go on with
taking
that
steps
strategic
to,
plan.
yeah,
Yeah.
are we making progress on the strategic plan? If they're checking it off, then it's working. You want a good working document.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to insult anyone, so I hope that you didn't take it in that vein, but we need on paper a way to navigate through the existential crisis that we're in right now, because right now, we have 4-point-something mills. Evergreen has a 12, and they have a robust tax base that we'll never have.
I agree.
And we need to put pen to paper, however you want to look at that, to basically document how we get from here to there. And that kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning of the meeting. I think we don't even know what there is, right? I mean, we know if we add more staff, it's going to create more people to respond. But I would argue your house is still going to burn down at St. Mary's, right? I mean, there's a station there that I mean, I'd like to see the call response times for the engines in that station, because
So then everybody is gonna say that I want the fire department at my house in 2 minutes or less.
Yeah, everybody, always.
Of course, what's your expectation? The expectation is I call 911 and damn it, I want police, ambulance,
Right.
fire right then and there.
there
You know,
are different standards for different parts
I
of the state.
understand that, I understand it, but so without giving them that foundation of information, the expectation and the information that we're gonna get back on this survey isn't going to be helpful. It's like, duh, of course they want it. So if we're spending all this money, if we wanna spend $270,000, wow, you just wrote a check for 140? Idaho Springs?
275.
Okay, oh, well, so there we go. Instead of having the folder on the shelf, my God, we just came up with $270,000 and we've got a strategic plan.
Yeah, so, and the other
You
half
know-
of that too is, like you're saying with the funding, every one of these municipalities is now taking a step to upgrade their funding until we can get this ballot initiative going on.
When was the last time the fire
Everyone
department
except for
asked
ESC.
for a mill increase?
I mean, I'm just, right
Sorry.
now, as of today, we have every one of us, without going anywhere else, have already contributed more money back to the fire authority this year.
Mhm.
Silver Point has a ballot initiative on to raise our mill levy going in April.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? ESC is the only one that hasn't made an issue yet, or hasn't made an initiative to go that route yet. So I think that's definitely right on the forefront.
I agree.
Funding.
I think Georgetown has, they're
We increased
doubling over
ours.
3 years, right?
We're doing
You
the
got-
step, yeah. phase
ESD costs more money to go service and go out and go do, and they're paying 4.69. And then somebody in the municipality is paying whatever your mill rate would come out to at 275. That's not fair.
Yeah, we're probably around 9 at 275.
That's not fair.
Well, I think you're kind of making my case for me, right? I mean, we haven't collectively decided,
I agree.
like, what is it that we want to,
No, I'm agreeing.
what do we want to accomplish? Like, what do the people deserve and what are they willing to pay for? And I think it's great that we're raising more revenue because, I mean, we should have been having this conversation 10 years ago,
I agree.
like two MO, you know.
We've been having
years
this
ago.
conversation for 8 years. Kelly has been structuring budgets out for 8 to 10 years, anticipating this. 100%, there's documentation behind that.
Mhm.
We have it. So I agree with that, and that's why the municipalities have already gone up and started raising their contributions, trying to make sure this is gonna be a living, working fire authority no matter what. So I agree. On the forefront, we need to figure out how the ESD is gonna get up and pay the same as much as we are. Because right now, you guys cost more for your service than anybody in any of the municipalities.
I think when we make claims like that, we should be able to back them up.
Yes. The report identified the
Yeah.
fact that it was municipalities where most of the calls are
So-
that weren't paying.
And I mean, I just want to suggest that these kinds of conversations and math problems are created by a fractured governance structure. Right, Title 32s don't have these conversations because we all just pay the same tax rate. Just want to point that out.
It may or may not be represented.
Yeah. Where Empire and Silver Plume definitely will probably be pushed out of that.
there are a lot of different ways to look at the, costs and who's bearing the cost. I do realize the report pointed out that Idaho Springs and Georgetown have the majority of numbers of calls, but that doesn't tell the whole story as far as I'm concerned, because one call in Georgetown doesn't necessarily cost the same as a call that takes however many staff, however many responders up to St. Mary's or over to Floyd Hill. It just, they're not apples and apples.
This is like, when you're in a marriage and you start figuring out counting who did the dishes when, right? And that's a sign that your relationship is in a bad place.
No, I agree.
Right? It doesn't mean you need to get better at counting who did the dishes. It means you need to find a new way to relate to each other.
No, I agree.
But it's these conversations and these meetings collectively that can get us there too. This is the best conversation that I think a lot of us have been participating in, to have our respective voices of our municipalities and the county and the ESD and everyone, at the same table on this. Aside, enlarging the board, right now, so. And Idaho Springs has a big call number because you're out on the highway, you're responding, you're not just in Idaho Springs, same with Georgetown, anybody. And there are no lines, recognize that. We're not going out to mutual aid and calling in Summit or calling in Gilpin necessarily, or calling in Jeffco. We're relying on what we've got within, and we're crossing those gray, borders.
I think one other interesting question is kind of who do we want to be when we grow up? And what I mean by that is, I think we live in a day and age where, at least in this area we're talking about, we don't need to be innovative. We don't need to create something that the world has never seen before. And if we're actually trying to create something the world's never seen before, we're probably doing something really fundamentally wrong. And when I look across the state of Colorado, the types of systems that we're copying are hugely expensive systems like Vail's or Eagle County's and Denver's. And there are plenty of other models. I've mentioned Evergreen, they're one model. There's West Metro, there's Crested View, there's a lot of different models. And I think one of the things that should be a topic of future conversation is, what are the 4 or 5 different models that serve rural Colorado, communities like us, Chaffee County, and what would be best for us? Because what we're doing right now is slowly marching, we're doubling down on the model that we have now, which I'm personally highly concerned about its financial viability. Because what's happened, I lived in Evergreen for 30 years, I lived in Quick Creek for 30 years. 30 years ago, Quick Creek Fire Authority had a very robust volunteer system with pretty much no paid chiefs or no paid firefighters. Evergreen in their strategic plan is talking about hiring paid firefighters, so they're heading down that path too. And my big concern is we'll never have enough money to have a fully paid system here. And right now, I think my perception is we're kind of in this purgatory where we have a group of volunteers, we're calling them volunteers, but we're paying them, right? They're basically doing shift work. They're coming from different communities into our community. And I don't think there's enough money that we can throw at that model to make it, again, put fires out in St. Mary's. And I don't know how we revive the volunteer system, but I personally think that's maybe the most viable solution to create better response times all around the county. And there are counties or there are communities where they're doing per diem work or shift work for in-county people. They're paying for their health insurance. I mean, there are other places that have cracked this one and figured it out. And I think we need to create maybe a working group within this stakeholder group to start looking a little bit more at that and trying to figure out, like I said, who do we want to be when we grow up? Like, what's a model that actually we can afford that puts fires out everywhere in our county?
And Sean, I think what you're referring to when you say the most expensive models, you're referring to models that have separate fire and EMS.
Completely different silos, yeah. Which is what we have right now.
I'm looking at the agenda. One of the questions that we put on here. Do we think we want a facilitator? My answer is yes, and I would observe to you several dynamics that I think a facilitator could help. One is, if Clear Creek County is creating the agenda and the word trust is being thrown around a lot, I'm not sure that we're serving ourselves the best. I don't think any one of us has a staff person that we can dedicate to hurting this process anyway, right? Whether they're trusted or not.
Still the same dynamic.
And like a Keystone Center person could come in and run herd on this and collect the questions and the conversations and the fears and facilitate the conversation, and, you know, have these governance conversations not be about, you know, who's been naughty and who's not been showing up to meetings or whatever. Does anybody disagree?
Mr. Anderson, you've been looking at me and what are your thoughts?
Just going back, I think a facilitator might help make level the playing field possible as possible. To your point, the volunteers, I was a volunteer for 20 years here, and I really think you're gonna have a hard time finding those people because the standards for the firefighters have increased. It's no longer just come on down, drink beer, and run calls. So I don't think there's a lot of squeeze left in the volunteer base for our community. Certainly you could get onesies and twosies here, but that's not going to solve your problem. As far as the options, I would, you guys need to, I guess what I want to say is it's clear in the study. The bottom line is whatever organization this is, it needs more money. So it absolutely should be focused with this group to find more money, and then the governments and the other pieces will come as you want to work on. But I would say that the focus should be whatever ballot needs to be on to get it on the ballot. And I really don't think that you could. I don't think that people. You need to find out how much they can pay, because I doubt it's even the level that we need to do any of our scenarios in that study. I don't think the populace could bear a 4 to 5 times increase in my property taxes all at once, or even agreeing to that.
I agree.
But the problem with that, you tie it into a Title 32, you're going to have to ask for that money anyway. So that money ask is no matter what we do, whatever we make it into, is going to need to be there. And it should be at the maximum it could be, because I guarantee you it's going to be lower than what we need to go farther into the future. So those are my 4 cents.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Who else?
So I'm happy to go out and help find us a facilitator. I do think at some point this group has got to kind of land on where it is we want to get in the end, right? I mean, are we going to a ballot? I mean, there's a July deadline, there's the official deadline in September. That's right around the corner, to be quite honest. So where do we want to end, right? Where do we want to end with respect to the question that's going to the voters? Are we talking about finances? How do you end the governance conversation? Is it a continual fire authority? Are we exploring it, Title 32? I mean, all of those kind of key decision points are then going to define a lot of the next decisions that have to come after that, right? So I think it's going to be incumbent upon everybody in this room to at least find a way to agree on what are some of the main decision points that need to happen in order to make any of these deadlines that are in front of us.
What occurred to me was that when we were talking about a facilitator and thinking about the election was that, yeah, now we have to find a facilitator, figure out how we're all paying for them, agree on the facilitator, hire the facilitator, schedule meetings for the facilitator to facilitate, while we're thinking about a clicking election clock running. And I think a facilitator is a good idea. I have a pretty, I'm pretty pessimistic right now that we can be as thoughtful as we wanted to be, achieve consensus, a facilitated consensus, and meet all the deadlines that we need to for a ballot item this year, unless because the ballot issue for that kind of taxation is going to have to be well supported by the facts. And if we need to have a facilitator to even arrive at some facts that we can then plug into a ballot issue, it's going to be pretty rough to get there.
I think you need to decide whether it's gonna be a mill increase for the ESD or a countywide tax.
Right.
Because if I lived in the ESD and you asked me to raise mills and you passed that, and then you come back and ask me to raise taxes again for the fire department, probably gonna get some middle fingers.
And yeah, so like, this is why I don't think we solve the ballot question without coming to agreement on the governance question.
Right, exactly.
And on all of these operational issues, right? Because, and I don't mean issues like shortcomings, I mean topics, all these operational topics. And I just want to read a sentence to you from a letter that the ESD board sent in 2022. And I believe this is still the ESD board's position. I'm not aware of a change in our position. The ESD board is not satisfied with the level of planning or the construction of a shared vision around the use of the additional funds a potential increase in mills will produce. That was what we said in 2022. I think it's a conversation we're still trying to land the plane on today.
You're not confident that the money will be spent well?
Without agreement on a plan, no, I mean, how, we can't agree on how to spend it, then obviously we can't draw that picture.
So would it help if the fire authority board guys here, we've asked the administration to come up with their version of what they think that correct 5-10 year staffing plan is going to be the major, along with capital improvement and truck replacement, the major ones. Is that what you're looking for to satisfy that feeling? Because I think this last study laid it out, at least some semblance of what it's going to look like with what they come up with.
There's that. There's kind of what I perceive as the elephant in the room, which is first responder safety, right? I have big concerns over reading in a report that fire authority staff thinks the way to be safe is to hurry on scene, and it's written into that report. That's what I'm talking about. You know, like, if are we budgeting to be able to afford to be safe or not? And I don't have a clear answer to that question. I have not, the fire authority board has not had a policy discussion on that. Yet that is the fire authority policy, as stated in writing. So those are the kinds of things, like that's just one of the things that we need to resolve. As well as this big issue, and this, Sean keeps bringing this up, and I'm grateful, is are we going to try to fund two separate, entirely separate departments? Or do we think we have to figure out how to realize operational efficiencies? My answer is yes. I think Sean's right. I don't think we get to afford to have two Cadillacs.
And the Cadillac that's at the county can't really leave because it's dependent on a 0.65% sales tax revenue stream that would disappear if they left.
Would it disappear? Could that just be on the ballot? We want to switch it to this, and you're already paying it, just asking to spend it in this different way.
You absolutely could do that. And I think that's the right way for us to be thinking about this is what do we want?
Not under
What system do we want and how can we? Right? That's my take.
Yeah.
Because whatever we decide is good and legal, we'll of course be able to explain in public why that's the thing to support. It will be unified. And I mean, that's what it's gonna take, right?
So we're thinking it's 7 months, 8 months, we want to re-govern, or figure out what governance we're going to, not re-governance, but rephrase that, what governance, why we're going with funding, and get a ballot initiative on our goals. We want to do that in a specific order while we all agree on something before November. So that ballot issue is what I'm hearing, right?
I think when you were taking a bathroom break or whatever, we were talking about the deadlines, it's more like July.
Yeah, right, so I mean, I would agree with that even more, I'm just saying ballot question would be November, but yes, July, 100%.
So 4 months. In
So
4
do we
months,
really think that we're all gonna be capable of that? Or do we really need to be having a conversation too, that IGA expires this year too?
My own personal view is sometimes deadlines and urgency focus you.
No, I agree, but I'm also saying that you should have things in the back just in case that they don't go as planned.
I totally agree with that. And I mean, in my own mind, when is that date? I don't know, but it's not till the middle of the summer, I don't think. And I think that gives us enough time to get to where we need, I think it's theoretically possible.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, I would like to make sure that we all keep that in mind, that we do have an IGA expiring this year.
Yeah, but I mean, that's largely why we're having this
No,
conversation.
I agree. I'm just saying that we're cramming a lot into a very short time period, is all I'm saying. That's where I'm getting at with it.
Bring out the most positive results.
Well, I mean, 2 years ago, when we were negotiating the IGA, I think we were looking for a 1-year extension, just so we could have this type of intensity and conversation last year. And that's not what happened, right? We ended up getting the report, but I think George said, well, at the beginning of the meeting, right? This is super important to us. You'll see our presence and our time and our money, and that's how you'll know that we're telling the truth.
I agree.
I mean,
Very, very important to me as well.
the question you're begging is once a month good enough?
Do we have a short-term
just
goal
ask
for our
them,
next
like,
meeting?
well, the next time we meet, after we find the facilitator, assuming that we found one, there'll be 3 months left.
That's what I mean.
And that's
Then we have a
3 meetings.
facilitator with 3 months. I mean, really, it's just scariness, is all I'm saying. We're jam packing a lot in the 3 months.
It's stuff we should have been talking about over the last 20 years.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
That doesn't change.
I'm not disagreeing with that, Sean. I am 100% saying that we are jam packing so many big decisions and a lot of discussion in 4 months right now, which we're actually gonna be cutting down to 3 months looking for a facilitator if we don't even get one at that point. I'm just saying, is everybody in this room comfortable with that timeline?
So I could just, if I could just add something. You'd all have to decide on the governance issue by early July. All we need to do is notify the clerk and recorder July 26th that we intend to put a ballot issue. So if you've determined the governance structure, whether that's an increase in mill rate, keeping it the way it is, going ESD and contemplating something that way, or even a Title 32, we need to have that determined all by July, by early July. Then we have essentially 2 months to provide that actual ballot language to the clerk and recorder. It's not due till September 23rd. So it is doable, just so you know, but my respectful suggestion would be is that you focus, like Georgia brought up also, and I think there's agreement, determine the governance. That's the big issue, because then that will affect everything else. If you end up going, for example, for a Title 32, that may modify your timeline differently versus just taxation or something.
I think also there were some other things that we wanted to inform them, which were for that survey of people in order to understand exactly what the needs are and further analyze the CIT report in order to actually come up with what the real number is that we want to ask for. So that's a little more than deciding a governance structure. It's also about figuring out how much money where we need to be 5 years from now.
I also,
Beth is-
I don't, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Beth is saying that Rick has his hand up, Rick earlier, but.
Okay.
Yeah. Rick, can you hear us?
Maybe the raised hand accidentally.
Well, we're figuring that out. I
Well-
think back to this.
Hello,
government-
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay.
Can you hear?
Okay, so it's strange. I'm on my phone to try to do this and I could barely hear you now when I clicked that on, so bear with me. I guess the question I have is, I wish I could be there, but I'm not feeling good tonight. But it seems to me, being a spectator watching this and not being in the room, it feels to me that three commissioners are very much in favor of changing the governance. Where the municipalities do not feel that way, they seem to be very fine with the current structure. We have met with the fire authority director or the executive director over that, and we went through a lot of questions. We felt very comfortable in the situation that we're in right now. So it feels to me like for us to go through all this process and having a facilitator and questions, it really does push this out when it's really the commission, the ESD, that doesn't want to follow the governance. And I think that's, to me, an issue when we discussed about trust earlier, where the rest of the board is very comfortable with this, but it's the commission. And I think that's the fear that the rest of the municipalities have, is that the commission is going to have its own agenda to lead this without the municipalities having any authority to make decisions on this. And that's my observation as I listen to this. And I think that that's telling to me as I sit and watch this.
Back to trust.
Well, let me just speak for one person. Rick, I just want to state that I have been sitting here without any bias at all about what the governance structure should be, whether it should remain the same or which of the others it should be right now. I haven't made up my mind and brought an agenda into the room. And I don't know that I've heard from everyone else in the room except three commissioners that they want everything to remain the same. So I'm not sure that I agree with the observation, but it is telling that for somebody on the outside listening in, that's the way it sounds. Sometimes we bring our listening to the room and hear what we want to also.
And Rick, I just want to chime in. I 100% agree with Randy. I am speaking for myself, not for council, but I truly have a very open mind. And I don't think for a minute that the people in this room, I just think we're all trying to get to the same place. We just want the most effective, firefighting that we can have for our community at, the best cost. And I just want you to know, I appreciate you from being outside the room, expressing your opinion, that that's the way it sounds. But I just want you to know, I personally don't have any agenda, and I have a very open mind, however this lands.
And I want to respond to that too. I definitely have an agenda, right? I want our fire department to be better than it is today. And that is definitely the agenda that I bring into this room. And I can only ask the people in this room and not in this room to trust when I say that I've asked my staff to bring me their thoughts on whether and how they can execute that recommendation, that's what I mean. What I mean is that I don't have enough information to have an opinion.
Right.
I share a lot of high level reasons why I'm pretty interested in the county running the fire department. And I share a lot of high level reasons why I'm pretty interested in Title 32. And I have a pretty dim view of the likelihood of this structure being able to solve the problems it needs to solve at the rate that it needs to solve them. I don't think any of that is a secret. I certainly am not trying to keep that a secret. That is my agenda. I want to understand this system and make it better.
What I was going to say earlier was, I don't think that we need to put this entire process on pause while we hunt for a facilitator.
No.
We can actually continue to make progress while we search for a facilitator who then, we need to hear from the fire authority board and staff for the specific response to the report, what is not quite right in the report, what is already being done. I think that's a huge piece, and I don't think we need a facilitator to help us do that. So I think, and there are probably other questions and discussions that we can have prior to actually finding a facilitator. I think the two can happen as we move forward.
Yeah, Lynette, good point. I just look at some of the questions we were dealing with tonight were easy and some are really thorny, but I think it was really healthy that we were able to weigh in I think a very respectful fashion and, you know, and look at this. We have to really to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, Rick, I appreciate you voicing that. And if I put myself in your shoes, I think I might feel the same way as you. And what I mean by that, when I observe kind of the path we're headed down now, it's moving paid staff from DLD to your town, to Georgetown, and to Idaho Springs. Your service is going to be improved. Your influence stays the same with 2 seats on the governing board. But one of the things I have a wider lens. I'm again looking at places like Floyd Hill and DLD now and St. Mary's, and you know, where does this path lead for them? And that's where I think I'm taking. I think it's a much different answer than if my lens only included Georgetown or only included Empire or Silver Plume or Idaho Springs.
Right. I think that right now, those people, all those other neighborhoods, some of which are larger than some of our towns, are represented by us, the Board of County Commissioners, sending a representative to the Fire Authority Board, which is George is sitting there and one other seat that's vacant, I think, right now still. So we have one person representing places that are as large as, virtually as large as our largest towns. You know, Floyd Hill is another Idaho Springs sitting up in the woods, to be honest.
I want to suggest, I'm taking careful notes, I want to suggest some next steps.
Right.
The list I have for additional information needed, hear from the fire authority on the operational recommendations. Clarify legal boundaries surrounding governance and revenue options. Hear from the county about how the recommendation for the county to operate the fire department could be operationalized. What I think I hear is that we could be in receipt of 3 presentations in the next meeting.
Sounds good, George.
Can I clarify something? You wanted an answer to how to operationalize county and fire department oversight by the next meeting? Is that what I heard you say?
And when's the next meeting?
You can do it at whatever level your resources and time allow.
Yeah.
As a starting point.
We're not looking for final draft, we're looking for.
Right, but the only way to do that is to open up the doors of the fire department and let us get inside. So we can see everything, budgets, contracts. That's the only way to do that kind of thorough analysis to understand what it would really mean to operationalize that.
Jeremy, do you think we should throw that on the agenda for Wednesday?
I think it's fine. Look, my stance is pretty simple on this. Again, I'm not the chief of the department, I'm just the lackey lieutenant. There's no data in our organization that's not widely open. Like, what do you want to know? Call loads, you want to know apparatus condition and everything. But we have fleet reports and also we do every year. I'll share anything your staff needs to make recommendations. The end goal of, at least for me, this is, again, I'm speaking for myself, whether I'm employed or not. I found a job, I was looking for a job when I found this one, and go back to make more money elsewhere, so I'm okay. Is I took this job 4 years ago to bring this department forward in some way, shape, or form. And I think we've done that in the last 4 years, not maybe at the pace that I wanted. But I'm probably impatient. And I think whatever this process looks like, it needs to be thorough, and I'll share information and answer questions or whatever we need to do to make this process as streamlined as we can. But we do have some deadlines. So that's my stance on this. I'm not gonna hold it up. I'll push it along because I think that's the only thing we can do at this stage.
Thank you. Jonathan, did I see your hand up a while ago? Do you have something to add to the conversation?
it was a while back, but when you guys were talking about moving forward on timeline, I was wondering if it might be possible to split this task a little bit, because you do have this idea of what funding is required. And some of the language around a potential ballot measure may look similar depending on, you know, even if it's different structures, just for the money part. It might be possible or feasible to think about like either a smaller subset of this group or a separate meeting that could be working on the kind of the ordinance to kind of draft out some framework that might be the same either way. So that when you get to the point of looking at everything all together, you're maybe a little bit further along the path and having to do everything all at once.
Are you saying that imagining each jurisdiction with its own ballot measure?
No, but it could be an option, I think. But I was kind of thinking like if you have a framework for what your ballot measure might look like, and I know the governance question is pretty critical to that, but I was just there may be similar language and things that need to happen for that to go. And you know, when you're talking about community engagement, education, every second counts. And I think meetings like this really help. But I was just thinking if you were able to separate the tasks just a little bit so that when you get to the end, that things have been kind of happening in tandem instead of just waiting all till the last second.
So you can plug and play the numbers and plug and play the structure.
Yeah.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I completely agree. I don't think we should put finding a facilitator as in the critical path.
And I don't think once a month is enough.
I agree with you,
I
Wendy.
agree. I hate having another meeting. Believe me, don't shoot the messenger, but I don't think once a month is enough.
Well, no, that's why I mentioned a little while ago, we've only got this many months.
Yeah,
That's to
exactly.
inform the discussion of how many meetings do we need to hold. It's not that it's not possible to get there, you know, it's.
May I ask what you all are doing in the first week of April?
We'll all be here or at the county, having this meeting.
Or maybe they married.
Sign us up. There you go.
What evenings are not open? Monday, I assume. That's the first Monday.
Yeah, and George, April 2nd through the 5th, I will be at the DCI conference down in Durango, so. But frankly, I think there's great representation with Andy and Jonathan, so if I miss that meeting, I think Idaho Springs is in good hands.
So you're asking about April 1st?
Yeah. Or any days that are open or not, any information to help us find a date that first week of April.
First or second is good for me, yeah.
I don't have any.
Also the 4th or 5th.
And Jonathan, I'm sorry if I volunteered you. I think you're also gonna be down there in Durango, so all right.
Looks like
I was.
All right, and let me retract that last thing.
George, public meeting in DLD on April 2nd.
Okay, so we can't do April 2nd.
We're doing April 1st, right?
I was talking about the first week of April, but April 1st falls in there. April 1st is a Monday.
Right.
Not looking at it.
Right.
We could tell them we're having a meeting and then not come. April 1st.
Is there a problem if we push back to the 8th and we can still squeeze another meeting in April? We still have, we could do, you know, we could follow it up with the 22nd or 29th, if Monday seemed to work so well for everyone, with the exception of Monday.
We have a city council meeting that night.
Oh, yours is typically Mondays?
Mondays, yeah, we don't have one scheduled on the 1st.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Is it every Monday or every other Monday?
It's usually every other Monday, but depends on how much we've got going on, so sometimes we have work sessions on the off week too.
Second community.
But I don't think we'll have one on the 1st.
So you are available on the 1st or not?
We are at the moment. I'm sorry, you won't.
Well, I think I'll be, yeah, headed down to Durango because it starts on the 2nd.
What about the 8th? That's also a Monday.
We have a meeting that night.
Okay. Wednesday the 10th, sorry, I'm doing my best to track this. Wednesday the 10th? You guys meet on Wednesdays, right? Empire?
I beg your pardon, are you on Wednesdays? Your meetings? I have. Oh, I can't do it on the 10th.
What about Thursdays?
I can't do Thursday. the 11th.
What about the 4th?
I can do the 4th.
Can you zoom the
Idaho
4th?
Springs is out.
Chuck? Or you guys are all out on that first week.
Except Andy.
Were you talking same time, same station, like evening meeting?
I'm
I'm sorry, I was just checking my
Yeah.
calendar for the 10th.
Because we're looking at our calendars, that's all.
Chuck, could you zoom in on April first, since the conference doesn't start till the second, and Kat won't have you at the bar?
You know what? That was a good suggestion. Yeah, I'm sure I could.
So April first,
It's not a joke, right?
Still think, what if I got phone connection, hopefully we'll be at the hotel later.
Would the fourth be better? So that you get there.
We can,
You have to drive that.
Chuck, we can be where we need to be for that. I can figure that out.
On the first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just telling Andy, I think we'd be at the hotel by the time this
we
meeting
just gotta
started.
plan for it.
We ought to have internet. I mean, I would say the first is fine. I'll zoom in.
And you guys will have had an hour to fire the plot and scheme together. Prepare, Idaho Springs, you can come in.
I mean, we're gonna get tacos too.
6 p.m. on the first.
6 p.m. on the first, is that, are we,
And
the where? Who wants to host this?
Trust me, you don't want Georgetown to know.
you're pushing for the BOSS, right, or BOCC?
I mean, I
Let's go back to the county.
I like I think that the functionality of a hybrid meeting is a little bit better in the county room. But I am not trying to exercise any sort of home territory advantage, so I'm willing to meet wherever you guys are comfortable.
I mean, honestly, didn't that go well? I thought it did. In Georgetown, that last meeting, it was comfortable. You had good internet.
You've got the equipment.
Yes.
Let's do the county.
The space is there and it's hybrid meetings are pretty awful when you can't see the people and they can't hear them, they can't hear you.
And maybe I'll plant a seed. Sean, I heard you offered Chuck to facilitate this since we were in Idaho Springs. Maybe the seed I'll plant is that if county doesn't have to facilitate the meetings, you guys are welcome to hang out and I don't throw that many arrows.
Right.
And George, I just, for the record, Sean didn't care one way or the other. I asked him because just the last meeting in Georgetown went very well. It appeared to me that no one was rushed. I really felt everybody was heard and there was just great interaction with the participants. So I thought, let's hope for more of the same. And I asked Sean to facilitate and so far so good.
I do like the idea of some shared facilitation though, and as a trust building exercise, although I totally agreed with Chuck that Sean did a great job and did again tonight. And I think one of the thing I'll throw out is that we probably ought to look at more than just the next meeting. What struck me as we started going forward and saying, well, what about the 10th and stuff? It's like, well, we're almost out to another month. We can't let this go. I think it feels like to achieve success here, it's gonna take at least meetings every 2 weeks from now until we crack the nut.
Yeah.
And that's for the overall group, with any additional meetings taking place in addition to that, which are like ITF meetings, like any task force that takes on a certain element of it, like trying to write the language and come up with something.
We have the standing third Monday, right? So it'll be the 15th, April 15th.
The standing third Monday.
I thought we kind of
Get a
decided
month
that
from
last
today.
meeting.
Does that conflict with you?
This is a third Monday.
Check.
Can we do standing first and third Mondays? No, that doesn't work for you guys.
That doesn't work for us.
That's the off weeks, it usually does, but every once in a while, we do have to have an extra work session, so that's the only caveat that I on the off weeks, so, but that should work for us right now.
Do we want that to send placeholders to all of us for first and third Mondays, 6 to 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ben.
I feel like we're approaching a good stopping point for tonight, but before we do that, Silver Plume, anything else to add?
Good, thank you. You did say the first and third Mondays, correct?
Yes.
Because right now, we've got a work session that we're on our schedule for the 15th.
Can we clarify?
Right.
We do have a work session scheduled for the 15th.
We're gonna ask,
Sorry, on the off week.
we're gonna ask our staff to get the financial.
Did you hear that? So the 15th is out.
Does Thursday work? Could we do a Monday and Thursday the third week and kind of fluctuate back and forth a little bit so that's not always on?
Right, I think when Idaho Springs has a conflict, we just pick another date that week.
I mean, so far Thursday, like, for example, the 18th is fine.
I've got something else going on.
April 18th instead of the 15th.
Does anybody have an issue with that?
Is there anything else for which we can find consensus for action? We're scheduling another meeting and and I had the same question, like, what about the facilitator thing? Is somebody looking for a facilitator? And is there anything else that we have consensus for action for somebody to take on between now and
I
then?
got a question, George, do you have enough notes for what the fire authority needs to bring as far as a presentation? Framework, outline? An idea of what would be good for them to work on and get something down. I'm thinking PowerPoint, something or other, presentation, something.
The three things, topics that you brought
Um, it's hard for me to be more specific than say, we need to know what we agree with and how we prioritize it. And there's a whole lot of recommendations in there. And I think we need to ask that question of all of them.
There's a lot of.
Yeah. And I know, like, I know that both
as
the
a-
organizations whose board I'm on have been asked to get to work on this months ago. And I know I just upset some staff in multiple organizations.
No, I think it's all in the study since we got it.
Right. I saw you had like a first round of that.
I've read it probably more times than you made this room. So, yeah.
Oh, no, I don't mean read, of course you read, but I mean,
looked this
it's.
up. I just wanna know, when do I need to have recommendations? Because that's my question originally was. My idea, because I'm not a part of the agreement, I'm perfectly honest, I'm Joe employee of this organization. So do you want my recommendation, what I think is important, or do you want the recommendation? My idea originally was what do you, as the elected officials that were parties to the agreement, think is important? If you want to reverse that, I'll have to give you my recommendations.
Yeah, we will see yours too.
If that makes it easier, I just want direction from a consensus from the group of what you want to see, because I don't want to offend anybody.
I think that's what the fire authority board asks, is get us your take on these recommendations.
Well, I've been working on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, those that don't know, we had a snowstorm last week, so.
I'm not trying to
I'm
be.
on like day 7 of limited sleep right now.
Yeah.
So I'm working on it. That's why we got consolidation, we got a copy of that, I think, right? The 26 pages versus 139 pages. Happily consolidate those into lists. That's not a problem. That's the next phase. My thing is waiting for this meeting to make sure that everyone in the room agrees that you're okay with me doing that. I don't want to offend anybody. No, I want to participate in that process. It's open. If you want to give me recommendations, please do. But that 26 pages, which is what, 23 pages of recommendations or so, 20 pages, we can consolidate those into categories 1 through 5, which will be previous. And then put it out and say, what do you think? Fine doing that. That's not a problem.
Well, I think it would answer the question, Jeremy, of what the fire department professionals that we're paying you, I think we should be headed towards, and what, I don't agree with the study's exact, fill out of your organization structure. Maybe.